Hello and welcome, finally, to weekly MTG. We think, as long as nothing else explodes.
Yeah. I assume that you can see us. We don't actually know.
Yeah, maybe. Our producer Sean's on fire.
Yep.
He's just running around in the background. We don't really know what's happening, but we're here.
Thank you for your patience, by the way, for waiting around.
For those of you who stuck with us.
Thank you.
We are here. We're going to talk about Pauper. That's what a lot of people are here to hear about. But we're going to start talking a little bit about Mythic Championship 3, and then we'll move into Pauper. And I'll tell you why we're waiting on Pauper for just a second. But with me today is Ian Duke and Gavin Verhey, both from the Tabletop Studio. Welcome, guys.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you for your patience, too.
Yeah, thank you for your. We just sat here for a while and we threw things at Ian. It was a good time.
The great thing about Magic is there's always something to talk about.
There's always something to talk about. Yeah, we told Gerard Fabiano stories and bad beats and chaos drafts. Anyway, that's not what you're here for. What you're here for probably is the Pauper news, which we're going to get to in a couple minutes. But I want to talk about Mythic Championship 3. We had some assets that we were going to show, but they were set on fire along with our producer, Sean. So instead, I just kind of want to get your guys' quick thoughts on what were the highlights for the weekend for you. Let's start with you, Ian.
Well, I mean, first off, I want to say the production quality of the whole show was just awesome, just amazingly entertaining and exciting. But of course, you know, when I'm watching a tournament like that, I'm thinking about what does the metagame look like? Is standard looking healthy? Is it looking diverse? And by all of our metrics, you know, I was really, really pleased with how the tournament went. You know, we had 3 different decks in the top 4. We had players who qualified through all three different means: special invite, qualifying through arena, and also through the MPL. 4 different countries in the top 4. At least 10 plus different decks that players registered. So yeah, overall very pleased.
Okay, Gavin, what about you?
It looks like a lot of fun right now. Definitely seeing that Nexus of Fate top deck at the end. That was awesome.
Yeah,
that was such an awesome moment. If you haven't checked out this video behind the scenes where Paul Cheon's like flipping out and when the Nexus of Fate is drawn, it's super awesome. But yeah, the standard format looks super healthy. It looks pretty fun to play. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what M20 adds to the environment.
Yeah, we had a video clip of it, but I think it's in the computer that's smoking off to the side over there.
Sorry.
Ian, what was your favorite deck from the Mythic
So I
Championship?
really loved, there were 2 players who registered Grixis decks, but they were both very, very different decks. One was my brother, who played an 8 Bolas Grixis deck, for Nicol Bolas Ravager and 4 of the new Planeswalker from War of the Spark. So that was really cool. It's actually coincidentally very similar to a deck I played a lot in the FFL. So, you know, great minds think alike, or it runs in the family, or however you want to put it. And then the other one was Yuki Matsuda had a Grixis Amass deck built around a lot of the War of the Spark Amass cards, and that was really cool and unique as well. So happy to see those.
Gavin, what'd you like?
My favorite, I mean, I'm always a red guy, so seeing Shahar make top 4 with the red deck, that was really nice. Yep. Experimental Frenzy continuing to still be a powerful card. We saw that in Guilds of Ravnica originally, and adds so much gas potentially to your arsenal. Yeah. I don't know, just a lot of like I said, cool decks, cool archetypes, and excited to see what the future brings for the format.
Yeah. So the top 4, for those who didn't get to see it, and if you didn't get to see it, I highly recommend going to check it out. You can just check out our video archives on Twitch page right now and see all of the coverage.
Your chat. You happy?
Merging it up
yeah, the Wooberg order.
We gotta get those Grixis colors together after talking about Bolas. We've not let it stand.
The top 4 consisted of Brad Nelson, Matthias Leverato, Shahar Shenhar, and Kai Buda. And there was a broad section of players there too, as you mentioned. 3 different ways to qualify. And Kai was a big story. How cool was it seeing him?
It was so great seeing him back in action, right? Like the player that I watched growing up, someone who has been in the Magic ecosystem for so long, going on, playing on Arena. That's just fantastic to see that he's been here for so long and is still at the top of his game in his peak performance. I mean, you know, one of the top 3 consensus players of all time, I would say. Yeah,
well, and even if Kai's at like 80%, that's still good enough to make Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just what he does. Yeah. But Ian, what do you think of? No player has embodied standard more than Brad Nelson, and it seems like if you throw a standard-only event in front of him, he's an automatic to top 8. How do you think he does that, where he consistently stays on top of it?
Yeah, it's really been an amazing thing. He's really made himself into a standard specialist over the years, and I think a lot of it is just keeping up with the week to week. You know, standard is a format where things are changing, you know, on an almost day-to-day basis. So keeping up with Magic Online trends and what did well in last week's tournament, and just trying to stay one step ahead of the game, I think that's really where Brad has shown his expertise.
Yeah, and for a player like Brad, who really came up through Magic Online, he's so used to following those trends and staying on top of it that, yeah, that probably goes a long way.
Yep. And how closely did the decks and metagame match what you guys were playing in the Future League?
Pretty close, but there are always differences. You know, we design the game in such a way that it's deep enough that we can't solve it internally with, you know, a dozen or so playtesters. If we could, it would be, you know, solved right away in the real world. So we expect to see some changes from what, you know, we were playing with. That being said, we did have a lot of the decks that showed up at this tournament have been showing up in Standard recently. You know, certainly red and white aggressive decks, certainly Gruul decks we played a lot of, Grixis decks we played a lot of. Surprisingly, we had decks that looked really similar to the Bant ramp decks that people are playing. And then we had quite a bit of Esper in our FFL as well, but we were more on the controlling side of Esper. I think part of that was not realizing quite how impactful Teferi Time Raveler would be, so we were playing more like counterspell control decks, whereas that's they're pretty harshly hated out by Teferi in the current metagame right now, which has created pretty interesting dynamics. You know, we've seen people going really far up the curve with huge spells like Command the Dread Horde and Mass Manipulation, which we weren't playing as much of because we had more counter spells in our environment.
Yeah.
Right, often an answer to those endgame decks is to have counter magic to stop them, and Teferi shuts that down entirely. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And how great was it seeing Matthias Leverato?
Matthias was awesome. He
Yeah.
was, you know, it was really cool to see him rise up the ranks in Magic the Gathering Arena, and obviously he's been playing for a really long time. But to see him make it this level of the tournament, playing on Arena, getting all the way there, and then that finals between him and Brad Nelson was just fantastic. I mean, that top deck Simic Nexus, Nexus of Fate, just sort of it blew up. It was crazy to see that happen. It's those kind of moments that make Magic worth watching. So.
And it felt like that would go down in history alongside like Lightning Helix
The
and things like
Lightning-
that. It was
Lightning
like a
Helix off
crazy
the
moment where you
top.
have a great reaction, you have them fist pumping when it happens, and if you watch like their reactions, right? Like he's like excited and Brad's like, oh no, he's fist pumping, right? You know, like clearly something bad is about to happen to me. It was perfect.
Yeah, one of the coolest things for me about Matthias' success here is that the Nexus deck that he's been playing, he actually qualified for the tournament with that deck. He's just been playing it all season long, and it's sort of his pet deck. And even though it wasn't regarded as one of the top decks coming into the tournament, the fact that someone can, you know, play their favorite deck and have a lot of success with it, even if it's not widely regarded as a top deck, I think that speaks really well for the diversity of Standard.
Yeah. And it goes to show that as a player out there, if there's a deck you love, keep playing it.
Absolutely.
And, like it can always be playable, right? Like you can always be good enough to win the tournament if you're just really dedicated, you know the deck inside and out.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've vamped enough. I wanted to give people time to get back in the stream after abandoning ship when all heck broke loose.
And we had to reset, and some graphics had to be rebuilt.
We had to reset, and some things had to happen, and Sean is no longer on fire, so
The
that's...
sprinkler system came on.
The sprinkler
you know.
system came on. Someone came in here with a fire extinguisher.
Rosewater's in a chicken suit out there somewhere.
That's just a Thursday. That happens. But we want to talk about Pauper. So we've kind of been vamping this Pauper announcement for a week now, and we've seen a lot of guesses as to what it is. But Gavin, set the stage for us. Pauper's been in kind of a weird place, right?
Yeah, so Pauper has been on Magic Online for a long time. It's kind of a format people play there. And last year, really at the start of last year, I'd say in January, there started to be a big community upswelling around it, guided by people like the Professor, and then Channel Fireball started running events at their Magic Fest for it, and we started to see this popularity grow and grow and grow. And one of the things I worked on last year is I kind of took a little research project of, okay, maybe I'll go to some of these Pauper events and kind of see what was going on. And, you know, first of all, I just started really enjoying the format. It's a lot of fun to play. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in it. You get to play some of your old favorites, like get your brainstorms, you know, that kind of stuff. But also the community really, really enjoyed the format. And there were some, you know, it was available online, and there were these kind of events being run on the side, but there wasn't necessarily a way to run them fully sanctioned, or at least, you know, at higher than casual level. So I kind of came back and wrote an email and to Mike Turian and Aaron Forsyth and some of the others, and it turns out that Turian and Forsyth had already been talking about some stuff for Pauper, and well, what fell out next is very exciting.
Yeah, so we're going to throw a bunch of information at you now. If you have questions about anything that we're about to say, just throw them in chat. Steve and I are watching, and we'll bring up the questions probably towards the end. We're going to get through all the information first and talk a little bit about
Because your
philosophy.
questions might get answered.
They might get answered.
They might get answered.
But we'll write them down here, and we'll get back to it. So, Ian, we're making some changes for Pauper.
Okay, so first let me just tell everyone what the changes are, and then I'll kind of go into the motivations, the details. So the biggest thing that's happening here is we are unifying the Pauper legality rules between digital expressions of Magic and tabletop expressions. And so the change that's happening is any card that is printed at common in a set, either on Magic Online or in tabletop in Paper Magic, will be legal in Pauper, of course, minus the banned list, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So that's the first change. And the second is also we are officially recognizing Pauper, that you can schedule Pauper events in Wizards Event Reporter as well. So giving it some more kind of formal support.
So you don't have to sanction it casually. It's literally on Wizards Event Reporter, you select Pauper event.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be great for both the community and also for us, because we're going to be able to gather more data on who's playing Pauper and where and so on and so forth.
Now, when you say you're unifying the formats, how many, do you know approximately how many cards are entering the format?
I want to say, that's a really good question. You put me on the spot here. I want to say it's around a couple hundred cards, I would say, yes. So the reason we're doing this is, as Gavin mentioned earlier, we saw people playing Pauper in a bunch of different contexts, right? Some folks played it on Magic Online, other folks were playing it at side events at Grand Prix, other times at sort of more local kind of grassroots community type situations, and each of these different ways to play kind of had their own rules in many cases. So Magic Online, of course, using the legality of whatever was printed at Common and Magic Online. Other folks who were playing in Tabletop were using whatever was printed at Common in Tabletop, but not things that were only printed at Common and Magic Online. And so things were getting messy pretty quickly. So we decided to take the opportunity and kind of clean everything up and just unify all the rules there. And we had a couple different paths we could take. We could either go with the Magic Online rules, which were popular, so things printed at Common and Magic Online, but not things printed at Common in paper, but not on Magic Online. That was one option. The other would be the reverse, to go with things that were printed at Common and paper and ignore things that were only printed at Common and Magic Online. A third option would be to go with sort of the intersection, things that were printed at Common in both paper and in Magic Online. And then the fourth would be what we had decided to go with, which is things printed at Common in either paper or Magic Online. And we decided, after talking about it a lot and thinking about the different communities and sort of what folks would want, that going with kind of the broadest, all-encompassing approach was the right thing here. So for those who were previously playing Pauper on Magic Online, you'll now have new cards that you can play with in Tabletop and vice versa.
Right. It was important to us to not get rid of anyone's deck, right? So if you were playing online or even in paper and there were cards on the old legality, we wouldn't want to take, say, a Chainer's Edict or something out of the format and really hurt your ability to play.
Right.
Battle Screech or these other
absolutely.
Now, Gavin, when you were out playing Pauper and checking in with play groups, how much of a split did you see, play groups in real life playing the Mitgo set or the paper set or the combination of the two?
You see a lot more of the Magic Online legality, but that was part of the mess, right? The fact that different areas had different rules. Local Card Kingdom, for example, would run Pauper events that would use a mix of the two ban lists and have other cards that were legal, and so it was kind of confusing, and a lot of people were talking about Pauper during this time. The community was really excited about it, but it wasn't really clear. There wasn't a unified language as to what legal meant or didn't mean. And so now, finally, we have a really clear list. It'll be on our website. It'll be in Gatherer coming up soon. You'll be able to search for it. I believe on the 2nd of July, it goes online on Magic Online.
Yep.
You'll be able to play it then. So we've got the whole thing laid out, and for me, it's really exciting to be able to search for all these cards and build decks a lot easier.
Yeah, so just to go over some of the key dates, so Magic Online will be updated, as you just said, on July 2nd is when all the Pauper changes will kick in. There'll be new Pauper leagues.
If you're watching this live, that's next week.
That's next week. Yep. We'll obviously be watching that closely. And then Gather is being updated. So Gather is going to be updated to where, because right now you can search for things by if it's in Standard, if it's in Modern. Pauper legality is going to be a search option on Gather on July 9th. That again is with the M20 update. Note that currently you can search on Gather for cards that are have common printings, and that will give you legality minus the B&R list. But on 7.9, we'll actually have the functionality where you can search by Pauper legality. And then as for sanctioning, my understanding is that that is actually already available. Check with your local stores if you want to sanction a Pauper tournament first to make sure that everything's working that way. But I believe that either is available or will be today.
And Ian alluded to this earlier, but something I'm so excited about is Pauper really grew up through the community. So it was through the great work of people and local communities talking about it that we got to where we are right now. And that's a great first step from going from a Magic Online only format to, hey, we are recognizing this in paper. It has, WER functionality, it's online, et cetera. Now we can get all that data in and see how much Pauper is being played around the world, how often these tournaments are firing. It gives stores the tools they need to run these tournaments. So if you want to see Pauper become bigger, I'm sure a popular question coming out of this will be, how can we get to the next level with Pauper? Talk to your local store, have them run an event. That's a great way to show us, hey, there's this support around the world for this.
Yeah, before all Pauper tournaments for us just went into a big bucket of casual, which they could have been commander leagues, they could have been someone who just didn't have enough people to fire a sanctioned draft. It could have been anything.
Mirrodin block.
Mirrodin block constructed.
got those arc sloggers and ready to dust them off, right? Yeah.
Probably not Mirrodin block constructed, but
no ban list.
No ban list modern. Yeah, it was in that bucket. So now we'll be able to tell, which will again lead to further iterations on what is happening with Pauper. But speaking of what is happening, there are a lot of cards that are new to the format that influence the format quite a bit.
That's right.
So we're gonna walk through some of them, including new additions to the banned list.
That's right.
So let's start with some of the cards that have been added but are not banned. So a big one, both in terms of damage and in terms of possibly resurrecting an archetype, is Goblin Grenade.
Oh yeah.
So where do you think this puts goblins now that... thanks, Steve. Now that Goblin Grenade is legal. Because Goblins has been kind of a, I would say, Tier 2, Tier 3-ish Pauper deck for a while. What does this do for the Goblins deck?
Yeah, it's definitely a question mark here. I think certainly people will try it out. This is definitely one of the more impactful cards that's being added to the environment. It could sort of resurrect this burn-heavy goblins type archetype, which I think did show up from time to time, maybe around a couple years ago in Pauper, but has kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. So I think this is a kind of a great opportunity where a deck that has kind of fallen down a little bit in the rankings might get a little bit of a boost and come back toward maybe more of a Tier 1 type spot, potentially.
Yeah, mono red, not goblins, has been a pretty reasonable Pauper deck for a little while now. And this maybe even creates a whole new brand, right? Going back to that Goblin strategy, using Goblin General, I believe is the card name, which we put at common in Vintage Masters, which is a great Goblin Lord.
That's the two, that one, yes, right.
Yeah, the 3-mana 2/2 when it attacks, absolutely. All your goblins get +1/+1.
Yep.
A great pickup from like Starter
or
something like that. And so there's some pretty good Goblin tribal stuff going on, and maybe going to have the creature-based strategy along with the burn could be a really nice way to finish this off. And plus, who doesn't love goblins? Like people always love building these Goblin tribal decks, and it'd be super cool to see one take prominence in Pauper.
By the way, chat, we know that some of the images that we're showing do not have the common rarity symbol in the line. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the image, it should say where it was first printed at common.
Right, so Goblin Grenade being added by virtue of being a common in Fallen Empires.
Exactly.
Which is not a set that exists one-to-one on Magic Online, and so it's being made legal because of the paper set.
Yep. Correct. And we're going to talk about some of these new cards, but if you're interested in what new deck archetypes are spawned, the professor of Tolarian Community College fame is going to actually do a stream immediately following this on his own channel, which is twitch.tv/Tolarian Community College. We will rate it when this stream ends, so if you're here, we'll push you over in his direction. And he actually has built some decks as examples of new decks that are possible in this format. But we've got some other cards that we can talk about, including Mystic Remora.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is
a big one.
This is a vintage playable card.
That's right.
That does a lot of work. This by virtue of its Ice Age printing. What does this do for the format?
Well, so First of all, I think it's really interesting that some of these cards have been legal in Card Kingdom tournaments in the past, so we've kind of seen some of them play out a little bit.
Sure.
And this is one that was a blue sideboard card, right? You'd really bring this in any kind of long blue control matchup, or if you're playing 2 Delver decks against each other, for example, you put it down for 1 mana, and then all the non-creature spells your opponent casts for the next turn, or next couple turns, depending on how long you pay for that cumulative upkeep, you'll just draw cards off of them. Because 4 mana is a lot to pay for every non-creature spell you cast. And so I think this will be huge in control decks, and also aggro kind of control tempo style decks where, trying to get in for a bit of damage, you put this down, and all your opponent's removal spells just put you right back up cards.
Yeah.
Right, or if there's a combo deck that needs to play a flurry of non-creature spells, in the same turn in order to go off, and then maybe this is helping you dig to a counter spell or some sort of disruption or interaction.
Yeah, this is a real exciting one. Plus, this is a great example of like a very wonky card that gets added in by this. Like, it's got all this rules text on it. It's got cumulative upkeep, what's going on, right? But yeah, it's quite powerful, and I don't know, it's just a fun card to have around.
It is a really fun, and like I said, we've seen this card be a powerhouse in vintage sideboards and occasionally main decks, so it's certainly good enough for Pauper. Next up, we have a card. This was, I think, the first card when Ian mentioned this card to me that clicked, that these additions actually change Pauper. This is a huge addition. It looks small, and I didn't even think about it because its original common printing was in Arabian Nights. But Desert is coming to the format. What does this mean for Pauper?
Yeah, this should open up a lot of deck building decisions here. So first of all, this is a colorless option that any deck can use to protect themselves against aggressive small creature strategies. But it's a pretty big concession to your mana base, and mana bases in Pauper can be notoriously difficult to get to be robust enough as one would like. So I think it's a really interesting option that a lot of decks are going to be able to employ. You may even see like Tron decks employ this, or more defensive blue decks. If they're mono blue, or maybe even some sort of more controlling mid-range deck using the Monarch or something along those lines. So yeah, lots of options here, but also deck building concessions, so it should be interesting decision making.
Yeah, interestingly, given that Pauper is all commons, a lot of the creatures are pretty small, right? You have a lot of 1/1s and 2/2s floating around, and Desert can make a really huge impact in those matchups against things like a blue Delver deck hitting their 1/1 Spellstutter sprites, or their little Fairy Seers, things along those lines. Against Elves, stopping some of that initial just small damage from hitting you. Llanowar Elf is going to come in for damage anymore. So as someone, when I got into Pauper and started doing this like a year and a half ago, the first deck I built was mono blue control with like 4 spikes and counter spells and like all the way up the chain, and then they just play like a 1-drop on the first turn. You're like, what are we gonna do about this?
And in a format like Pauper, we don't often print common creature sweepers. Cards like Day of Judgment or Pyroclasm. Those just aren't common effects, and so having something that can protect you against a swarm of small creatures is really a unique kind of thing in the context of Pauper.
So this is one that I agree has a huge impact, and I'm excited to go brew with.
Before we get to the banned cards, the newly banned cards, I should say, I want to talk about kind of a weird section of cards being added to the format. We're going to call this the Forked Bolt exception. So where Forked Bolt is now going to be in Pauper. Where was it printed?
Okay, so this one particularly, this is one of the strangest exceptions I came up with as I was doing my research here. Forked Bolt was printed originally at Uncommon in Rise of the Eldrazi, but it was printed at Common in the dual deck Zendikar versus the Eldrazi, I think it's called, which coincidentally was one of the dual decks that wasn't printed on Magic Online. So it's in this weird spot where there is a common printing in Paper Magic, but only in this one supplemental product. So just to be clear, Forked Bolt will be legal by virtue of this rules change. It is one of the very strange exceptions. By and large, most of the cards printed in supplemental products like dual decks and other are printed using their last printed rarity in paper. So very few rarities end up changing as a result of those. However, just to make things as simple as possible and just be able to go by the rule of if it has a common printing in Gatherer, it will be legal in Pauper, unless it's on the banned list. We did decide to include supplemental products like dual decks. And there are only a couple exceptions, and I think Forked Bolt is one of the few cards that's actually quite relevant to the metagame. There may be some others that turn up in fringe cases and such, but yeah, just to be clear, those will be included, and there are a couple wacky exceptions like that.
Well, and since Pauper has started on Magic Online so long ago, dual decks have been no exception to this rule. Serrated Arrows, for example, is in the Garrett versus Liliana dual deck, I believe, and that's at Common, and that was a huge addition to the format at the time. So there's a long and storied history of dual decks adding strange cards into Pauper, and Forked Bolt is just one more wonderful example.
Gonna write about, we haven't answered that question. So one of the questions we're getting in chat right now is, what about cards that are printed at Common but not available on Magic Online?
Fantastic question. So I actually had the opportunity to speak with the Magic Online team, and they are planning to watch how this plays out, listen to community feedback, and if there are cards that are made legal by virtue of being common in tabletop Magic but don't have versions on Magic Online at all, that they will look to add those cards to Magic Online, maybe through treasure chests or some other promotional type thing. But they'll be certainly listening to community feedback and try to make those cards available if they are in demand.
Yep, and we have precedent for this. Palace Jailer was a card that people didn't realize when it was printed that it was going to have a legacy impact, and it did, and so Magic Online printed it through treasure chests. So something similar can happen here if there are cards that people... Prof, who's doing some decks after this already, messaged me one particular card.
Should we tell him what the card is?
No, we'll let
Okay.
Prof talk about it. Yeah, we'll let Prof talk about
All I'll
it.
say is all four of us had to look it up on our phones.
Yeah, that
None
was
of us
pretty
knew
insane.
what it did.
I at least remembered the artwork and which set it was
The
from.
artwork is gorgeous, but yeah, anyway, Prof will talk about that card, and he may have others. That was the only one he brought up to me. But yeah, we'll be watching that in Magic Online. So let's talk about the new BNR list. So before we get to the cards, what was kind of the philosophy you went into this with?
So essentially, we wanted to leave things as open as possible. We did want to have new cards that would impact the format, create new decks, and shake things up a little bit. But that being said, with each new card that was being added, especially if it's a high impact card, we asked ourselves, is this going to make the format more fun to play? So there were a few cards that we looked at from both a power level and a play pattern standpoint, and we said, hey, we think our best guess is that we're probably going to have to ban this card in the short term anyway, so we might as well just start it on the banned list. But again, that being said, we try to be as liberal as possible with things being legal. So to that end, there were 3 cards that we decided to start on the banned list, in addition to the current existing Magic Online ban list. And those 3 cards are...
Well, let's bring up the first, this twosome. So only one of these cards is banned.
Okay.
To be clear.
Chad, would you like to guess which one?
So we've got High Tide and Merchant Scroll up there, and the issue was that these cards in combination looked like they were going to be a problem.
Absolutely. So this was kind of like the borderline of the cutoff of where we decided to add cards to the ban list.
Yeah.
And we debated between High Tide and Merchant Scroll which of these 2 we would want legal, because we thought having both of them legal in combination, it would just be too easy to search up a bunch of High Tides and do whatever banana stuff you were going to do from there, snapping back Archaeomancers or whatever you're going to do there. So we decided in the end that High Tide was the riskier of the 2 cards to have legal. It's not, I will say, it's not obvious that from a power level standpoint, the format can't handle it. But one of the characteristics of Pauper is that having only common level effects, it can be really difficult to deal with a combo deck that can win the game in 1 turn from hand. Only certain colors can do that, and only with a small selection of cards. So we decided that if High Tide were to show up in large numbers, it would probably be a detriment to the format diversity rather than, hey, here's a new cool deck. So in the end, High Tide was the card that we decided to add to the banned list. And having done that, we thought that Merchant Scroll would probably be okay. It might show up in other contexts, like a Tron Mystical Teachings type deck might use it, for example, or other new decks that people decide to create. But we think the format will probably be able to handle it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, High Tide is a classic what goes right card.
Exactly,
In here.
right.
No one ever is like, with 4 islands, High Tide, 6-mana creature, go, right? That's not, not really a thing you ever see. So,
Is that not how you're supposed to use that card?
right. So yeah, and plus Pauper has a long history of like Storm-esque decks where you're like untapping a bunch of lands and doing stuff.
Right.
Yep.
And to be clear, again, like this was the borderline here, and there were, I spoke to a bunch of Pauper aficionados both inside the building and out, and different people had different cases to make one way or the other for this card. But in the end, we had to make a decision and use our best judgment, and this is where we landed.
Totally.
Okay. And then there's 2 more cards we're going to add to the ban list. We're going to put them up at the same time because they have
Chad has pretty much already guessed.
they've
what they are.
nailed it. Yeah. Well,
Okay, well,
not talking about them
I'm
earlier.
glad
was-
expectations
Yeah, that
are
was
being
probably
met.
a big tip off. But here are the cards.
Okay, so Sinkhole and Hymn to Turok. Why these 2
So
cards?
this is both a combination of power level and play pattern. Hymn to Torak is just over the line on both of those things. I've played with and against this card a lot. I was a big Legacy player back in the day, and I love playing Pox-style decks, so I've cast a lot of Hymn to Torak in my day. It is both very powerful just from a raw card advantage standpoint, but also because the discard is random and it's coming down on turn 2. A lot of games just end on turn 2 when you hem your opponent and get their second and third land drops or whatever, and they just can't cast a spell that game. So both for the combination of the power level and also some play pattern issues, we decided that one was not going to make the cut as far as legality is concerned.
I too do not enjoy playing against 4 copies of Mind Twist in my opponent's hands.
Right. And then Sinkhole is actually a little bit more contentious. Again, discussed with a lot of Pauper players, and there's certainly a case to be made that Sinkhole as a countermeasure to like Urzatron lands, for example, could be something positive. Could maybe let like a black mid-range deck have more of a way to stop Tron decks from going over the top of them. But that being said, like the splash damage on the rest of the universe of fair and fun Magic is pretty high there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, again, both power level and also getting land destruction on turn 2, not the most fun thing in the world. Especially including like Dark Ritual being legal in the format too, so some pretty explosive draws can happen. So in the end, we thought that would be just net negative fun to add to the format.
Well, and mono black is already a very real deck in Pauper, so giving them these 2 new toys would probably cause issues.
Yep, totally agree.
So how much deck building, how much theory crafting did you guys do with it?
We did
new decks?
We did a bit. I'll be totally upfront and say we weren't like Pauper FFLing. We weren't actually building decks and playtesting them against each other. But we did do a lot of theory crafting and discussion and research, reading community articles and things like that. And some of the things we think are interesting, we talked about some of the cards already, like Goblin Grenade. Another one that comes to mind for me is Ashnod's Altar is a pretty cool addition to the format. This was printed at Common in Chronicles, I believe.
Yep.
And there may be some sort of combo there involving like Mirror Retrievers or some sort of sacrificing a bunch of small creatures and casting something big. That's one of those ones where we kind of left it up as a question mark in the air where, hey, if this does produce a deck, it's probably not that high of power level, and fairly disruptible in terms of artifact removal or hand disruption or whatnot. And that if it does create a new deck, it'll be a very different deck from what we've seen before. And we'd rather let that evolution play out. And in the case where we might need to make a change down the road, we're okay with that. Yeah.
One of the things I think we should probably clarify to our audience is when we say we're unifying Paper and Magic Online, the ban list is not going away.
Correct.
The ban list is staying the same. These 3 cards are cards that are getting added on to the current ban list.
It's not just those 3 cards.
No, like the current ban list is staying in place. Those cards are still banned. You still can't play with them. We're just adding 3 on.
No temporal fissures for you.
And we did get the question, is any of this information going to be posted anywhere? Yes, if you head to dailymtg.com, our news website, you will be posting an article that has all of the changes in it right there as soon as this stream is done. Speaking of which, we're just about out of time. I want to make sure to go through a couple things. One, let's recap what the changes are. First, we're combining the paper and digital Pauper formats to one unified Pauper format. That's just everything that's ever been printed at a Common anywhere for any reason is in. Everyone into the pool. Magic Online is going to update their formats on July 2nd. We're going to be adding Gatherer support for searching by Pauper format on July 9th. It's going to be sanctionable as a format rather than casual, which is what it's been in the Wizards Event Reporter. And then we added 3 cards to the BNR list, which is High Tide, Sinkhole, and Hymn to Turok.
And again, those are additions to the existing current Magic Online ban list.
Yeah. So we won't be doing... I'm gonna spoil it now. The July 8th BNR announcement will not include any further Pauper cards.
That is correct.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll be watching it to see what changes, but for now, this is your new BNR list.
And I also just want to say, once again, thanks to all the community members out there who made this possible. Like watching the discussions on Twitter and on Reddit and on the professor's videos and at events I visited have been great. So thank you for giving us all this feedback, and thanks to Mike Turney and Aaron Forsyth for kind of leading the charge on this. In the building. So really great work on everyone.
Yeah.
And now we'll see what happens next.
Absolutely. So for weekly MTG, we've got a couple cool shows coming up. Next week we're off because it's the 4th of July.
American Independence Day.
American
for those
Independence
of you
Day.
Across the pond.
On July 11th, we're actually going to be, so there's going to be another thing streaming on the Magic channel.
Yes.
So we are actually moving weekly MTG to our Facebook stream.
Facebook Live.
Facebook Live. So Mark Rosewater is going to be on that one. We're going to be talking about M20 stories, which will be fun. The week after that, so this is a cool show, July 8th, Seb McKinnon's going to be calling into the show.
Yeah, can't wait for that.
That's awesome.
Fan favorite artist, Seb McKinnon.
Those were genuine reactions. They didn't know that was
No,
happening.
they didn't. I did. But they didn't.
Stick around and follow the raid to the Professor's channel, which is twitch.tv/Tolarian Community College. He's going to be going through the Pauper announcement. He's going to be showing off some new decks that are for the new format, talking about what might change. He's very excited about all these changes, so definitely tune in to his show. Thanks to Ian and Gavin for showing up. Thanks to Steve for being here as always. And we will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Have fun.
Take care.
Happy brewing.
Yeah.